So I want to talk about my experience with, like, we'll say the unsavory supremacist stuff in the metal scene, because I do have personal experience with it, and I played in a band like 10 years ago called Bestial Evil. Keep in mind, this is stuff that happened. What I'm about to talk to you about is stuff that happened 10 years ago, 2015, 2016. So take it with a grain of salt. I've since more or less reconciled with Sean. He and I talk sporadically. Um, Nick as well, who was the one other guitar player in the band besides me. He was in Sean's newer band. I'm not sure if he's still in the band, but Sean has obviously since distanced himself from these folks and started a new band, and his new band seems to be doing all right, playing shows and gigging and stuff. So yeah, let's get into it. So I was in a band called Bestial Evil. Um this is actually a site called Ida Vox, which is kind of like an anti-fascist journalist site that do like editorials and stuff. And this particular piece was about my band, and it has my full name in it. It is what it is. But to make a long story short as to the origins of this, I've been playing music. I've been playing death metal in the Baltimore city music scene since 2007. 2006 is 2007. I was in a band called Reanimator that was like a like Impetigo, like Mortician style, like death grind, like horror movie worship band. But I also played a bunch of other bands. I played in a band called Grounds, which is like a more like black metal influenced grind band that existed right before, like right on the dawn of stuff like Full of Hell, when that thing was still kind of in its nascency. I was in a band called Lapse, which is like East Coast, it's like type power violence type band. Come here, baby. And I was in another band called Disassemble, which was like kind of like a crusty like grind band. And she's gonna go get a drink of water. So yeah, that's just like my history playing music in Baltimore. And I ended up in this band because I hadn't, until before the forming of this band, or rather before I joined this band, I hadn't played music in like 5 years. So I was kind of itching to get back in the game. I knew Sean from the scene and going to shows at the local spots. Shout out to Barclay House, shout out to Nowhere House, spaces that don't really exist in the city anymore. But if you were there, you were there. If you know, you know. But let me stop yapping. Let me read this. Um, the caption underneath the photo is: "We spoke with Baltimore band Bestial Evil about the drama that ensued when they fired their drummer Evan Phillips last week. We don't know what happens next now that they brought him back." So I'll point out in this photo, it's funny that this was the dude Evan Phillips in question, their drummer, who was actually a fully patched in and dues paying member of the Wolves of Vinland. You can look them up. They're on the Southern Poverty Law Center, listed as a hate group. They're like a pagan, white supremacist, wannabe Sons of Anarchy type vibe. So this guy on the far right was actually in it. That's why it's funny. He like put his arm around me or whatever, like this. And this guy on the far left was prospecting under him to be in the group. And to my knowledge, this dude on the left is actually still involved with some neo-Nazi stuff. I actually had a how can I put this? I had a raucous encounter with this dude here on the left, which caused him to subsequently expediently leave town along with the members of his other band. Um, so yeah. Anyway, a Baltimore metal band is trying to. Well, I should read this part too. I guess it's important. It's an update. I gave you the most recent update about this whole situation, but they updated this on 2016, so I guess I should read this. Update 22 6/22, so June 22nd of 2016, which is maybe a month after I'd quit the band. Sean Wright contacted us to say that he wasn't a one-time Antifa activist, but still remains so. We have changed the article to reflect this. Um, let me find out you were in the green room. Low key, dude. There was a venue, and I'm gonna say the venue because it's whatever. This venue called Riff House Pub in Lynchburg, Virginia, which it was exactly how it sounded. But we played with like, of course, I didn't know it at the time, but it was like a goat moon like worship band, and there was a bunch of wolves there. Though I actually mention it in this article, um, that the one other black person who was at the venue came up to me and like asked me if I actually felt safe there, which was very interesting, which kind of started to open my eyes to the whole situation. But a Baltimore metal band was trying to pick up the pieces after firing a band member after it was learned that they were associates of a white supremacist group based in Lynchburg, Virginia, only to bring him back again days later after he cut ties with them. So that actually happened. I was no longer in the band. I'd quit, but Sean actually brought this dude back in the band at the time. Bestial Evil, a band that has been around for 3 years, originally announced that they were firing their drummer Evan Phillips after it was learned that he was associating with the Wolves of Vinland, a neo-fascist group that adheres to a form of racist heathenry. Evan Phillips is no longer in our group, the band Bestial Evil originally said in a June 14th message on their Facebook page. We are sorry for anyone we let down on upcoming shows. We are regrouping and we are far from over. Bestial Evil will return this year stronger than ever. Eventually, the posting was truncated to omit the announcement that Phillips wasn't in the band, and on June 19th, they announced that Phillips had returned. We'd like to welcome Evan back, the post read. He quit the Wolves of Vinland, Bestial Evil returns. So I'll say this. For me, this type of stuff, especially when you've been involved with a group like this for as long as he was, contributed thousands of dollars. He also happened to be there's like pictures of him literally with like hugged up the way that he's hugged up with me right here, hugged up with the head of Maryland skinheads, hugged up with the head of Keystone State skinheads, or Keystone United, I think is what they're called now. Like multiple white supremacist organizations. This dude was at least casually involved with. But the Lynchburg-based Wolves of Vinland, also known simply as the Wolves, is a white supremacist group that was started over a decade ago by brothers Paul and Matthias Wagner, the latter of whom has described the group as an Odinic wolf cult. Their support base have ranged from persons such as Jack Donovan and Youth for Western Civilization's Kevin Deanna and Devin Saucier to various circles of the neo-fascist scene. One member, Maurice Hjalti Micheli, pled guilty in 2012 to attempting to set fire to the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, a 135-year-old black church in Gainesville, Virginia, costing $1 million in damages. Micheli served 2 years in prison. Paul Wagner also once posted pictures of himself in a historical Lynchburg graveyard in a section where African Americans were buried, using their gravestones as weights. And of course, there's also pictures of Paul Wagner visiting this Maurice Micheli person in jail. But the One People's Project, associated blog full of Vinland monitors and reports on the wolves. I don't think that blog exists anymore. But at the time they did, and they used to keep track of all the individual, like, blatantly racist, or just like weird, like animal cruelty events that the Wolves of Vinland were engaged in. Evan's not a white nationalist, not a racist, and he's not a Nazi. I know that for certain. Bestial Evil's lead singer, Sean Wright, who says he has been involved in anti-fascist work, told One People's Project prior to bringing Phillips back into the band. What are you doing? Come on. Come here. Sorry. I should note that there is definitely what we didn't know, what he didn't know, but I knew at the time, was that there was pictures of this dude wearing like a World War I or World War II German military uniform. Multiple screenshots of him using the N word. On top of the pictures that he already had of him posing and cheesing with the heads of multiple skinhead organizations in and around the Maryland tri-state area, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, what have you. What I don't understand, and a lot of people don't understand, is why he got involved with this group. And that's something that I don't know at the time what he was thinking, but it is something that I know he regrets wholeheartedly now because of what's going on. And that part I believe is true. He started to get, like, what happened was, this was pointed out that the group that he was in was part of, was listed as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And so his bands, any band associated with him, and anyone associated with the Wolves of Inland started to get banned in Baltimore City, which is something, is a point that I'll get back to. Because if you let one Nazi into your bar, you now have a Nazi bar. Like, if you let one of them feel comfortable, they will invite all of their friends, and then suddenly those will be the only people who come to your place. But yeah, suffice it to say, all the people that were involved in that organization were subsequently banned from all the major venues in the city. He's not into sketchy shit at all, Wright continued. He did all this stuff as like his Norse/pagan perspectives. His whole Viking thing that him and a few other people I know, including people not in the Wolves, are into. None of them are racist at all. And I've spoken on it before, but I low-key respect the whole Norse and pagan thing. Like, if you're into ancestral worship and ancestral magic, that's cool, as long as it's not influenced or involved in any type of supremacy. But also, the Viking stuff is really weird to me, because it's like you're venerating people who didn't shower and also attacked defenseless churches. Like, I don't know. Phillips, however, has been deeply associated with not just the Wolves, but with other area neo-fascist groups. Earlier this year, another band he plays with, an Irish folk band called Shamrogues, performed at the annual St. Patrick's Day event sponsored by Baltimore-based Label 56, a white power distribution outlet run by members of the Maryland Skinheads. And I talked about that. I didn't mention Label 56. I mentioned Maryland Skinheads. The head of Maryland Skinheads was also one of the co-owners of Label 56. As stated, it was a white power distribution outlet. They distributed bands like Argoslant, Grand Belial's Key, Satanic War Master. You know, they were a distro of all of that type of stuff, which is, I'm going to repeat myself in that stuff is only in a certain section of metal, but it's considered okay. Like, people just let that fly. But the people who are into that stuff are really into that stuff, even though they will play it off like it's not a big deal. It just makes no sense to me. I mean, it makes sense because they're white supremacists, but the excuses people give for it are nonsensical. Phillips also plays with another metal band called Vorgum, who last year released a live album of them performing at the Wolves of Inland compound. He reportedly still performs with the band today under the name Ulthamer. Phillips told One People's Project that he had been involved with the Wolves for 3 years, getting into them through mutual interests in music, physical regiment, and people being different and living on the outside, rejecting technology and other things that would seem as distractions. And all that stuff is all well and good, but like, the fact that even if that was the focus, the fact that you're able to casually overlook the blatant white supremacy, the fact that you're able to look around and be like, this is exclusively white people, and some of them are being kind of casually racist, it's not a good look at the very least, you know. He said there were a number of people involved that had far-right leanings, but they never brought those ideals into any group meetings. Overall, he says the group focused more so on other things than politics. Those guys, they had an impact on me, he said. It was what it was, but there's other people in my life, like my band, that I have to stick up for and protect, and I can't be associated with stuff like that anymore. And this is the same vibe you'll hear from a lot of people who, you know, you'll see it in my comment section. People are like, metal is supposed to be extreme. You know, like, we're wimps for not accepting that, when the reverse is not true. Like, why are you not wimps for not accepting Antifa? Right? Because The last time I checked, white supremacy is not only tolerated, but in certain cases endorsed. Especially if we're talking about uh, current being 2025. We're talking about the current sitting presidential cabinet, right? That literally has Antifa marked as domestic terrorists. Um, I think being a domestic terrorist is a little bit more extreme, is a little bit more off-putting to the mainstream person than something that the country was, literally founded on. But I digress. Phillips says he also did physical training along with other wolves at the Exile Fitness Center in Rosedale, Maryland, which where MDS associate which is where MDS Maryland Skinheads associate and Label 56 founder Jason Tankersley ran Absolute Combat Sports from, and although it was no longer in existence, also still trains there. And I can confirm that. He ran this thing called Exile Fitness, but now it's just the fitness center. And the thing that these people will do is, and they'll talk about this, you can see documentaries where they talk about doing this just so they can stay in with the positions wherever they are, trying to get into positions of power and community influence, where they'll say they disavow. Like, disavow is actually like a buzzword for them. They just say the word disavow, and that's supposed to, you know what I mean, wash their hands of all these associations, even though they continue to still be around the same people and still be involved in the same organizations, just on the low, just secretly, right? Um, it was there that he was reportedly asked by Maryland Skinheads associate Rick Haught, who goes by Rick Indy, or at least he went by Rick Indy, if the Shamrogues could play the St. Patrick's Day party the group held April 2nd. I honestly did not know what it was, and it ended up being that, he said. They just asked, do you want to do this post St. Patrick's Day gig? And I asked the guys and said, do you want to do this? And they were like, sure, why not? And it ended up being that. So that's the other thing. People always play dumb. They're like, I had no idea that this obvious neo-Nazi, that this famous neo-Nazi, that the head of this neo-Nazi organization from this adjacent state that I live in would invite me to play a white power gig. Like, it's just really silly. Another Bestial Evil member, Jacob Ripley, also came under fire because he too was involved with the Wolves, even wearing a prospect patch for a brief time. I told you he was prospecting under this dude. In a post on his Facebook page, he says that he is not a racist, nor does he judge people by gender, race, or heritage. I subscribe to the Asatru religion among Hinduism and atheistic Satanism, and have been involved with various groups, including the Wolves, through my exploration of fringe spirituality. I learn what I can from different organizations until I learn of an obstacle that breaks my moral code, just as I did with the Wolves. At this point, I stand alone with no ties to any group other than a small handful of friends I trust. Which, first of all, the Wolves, just like how they say Satanism doesn't mix with really anything else, um, the Wolves do not mix with other organizations for reasons that should be fairly obvious. But just as with this other individual, Evan Phillips, the reason why he left the group was because he didn't want to get banned in a city that he was working so hard to build a home and build a brand, like play music and stuff in. So, and this is the part that's about me. Much of this does not sit well with a former member of the band, Kevin Rucker, who left the band last month, mostly because the issue of Phillips' association with the Wolves had been coming up since the very beginning. We played a show in Virginia that was at a place called the Riff House Pub, and it was nothing but wolves there, which also happened to mean that there was nothing but white people there, he said. The one other person of color there was another black dude from one of the other bands that played that night. The only thing he said to us, he came up to us and asked us, how do you feel about this wolf situation? How do we feel about it? I thought that was interesting. And as like I said before, like, it was low key some green room shit. They weren't hostile towards us. They were polite and respectful, but it was still a very, like, it's something that looking back on, I would be very unnerved if I were in that now. But at the time, I was going through a lot of my life. I was drinking a lot, and to go back what I've said earlier and to allude to things that Andrew Lee has said about the situation, I was just going along to get along. I thought that if I raised the fuss, we would lose opportunities as a band and so on and so forth, which is the same way that Sean felt, which is why he even entertained having these people in the band in the first place, which is that there's a lot of pressure to just casually accept this as part of the metal scene, even though, if you, like I've said before, if you really dig deep into the origins of the music and what it's supposed to be about and where it came from, this is a straight up aberration, not even just like an aberration, but just like a gross perversion of everything that metal is supposed to be. But and I say that as a person who also believes that it's just music. Like, people get really, really, really too serious about what metal is as an institution when it's literally just vibrations that hit your eardrum, right? Like, half of the people that get into metal now are not, we're not there. Most of the people who are getting into metal now were not there in the beginning. I got into metal through downloading on the internet and like going to the mall and record and tape traders and that whole thing. Like, there's a weird section of metalheads who see it more as like a secret society or like a white boys club, when it's really just music and you just find other people who like the same music as you. Sometimes you vibe with them, sometimes you don't. Sometimes they're fucking white supremacists, sometimes they're not total human pieces of shit. But yeah. Phillips associations became an underlying current for the band, with more and more evidence that they were particularly problematic, even while Phillips denied they were a racist organization and that he held racist beliefs. The final straw for Rucker was an argument on Facebook with Phillips just after Bestial Evil played this year's Maryland Death Fest. I'll get back to that. And Rucker posted his disgust at seeing a lot of fans wearing Nazi and racist tattoos. A week later, Phillips, who routinely posts rants against political correctness and other things deemed liberal, made a post about how people always post the same boring rhetoric about social issues that Rucker took issue with in light of his concerns. I kind of made a snarky comment. I said, hey, must be nice to be able to see social issues as boring. And he said, yes, it is. Because that's what it is. Like, they're white people. They are very aware of their privilege. They enjoy their privilege. They enjoy not having to engage in things like racial justice, gender equality, social issues. Like, they want things, they're conservatives. They want things to be the way they are. They want to be the kings of their little miserable shit pile, right? The quote unquote master race. When a few of Phillips' neo-Nazi friends entered the back and forth, and with likes to the comments, Rucker says he was thrown by that. That exchange continued with Rucker calling Phillips out for being friends with neo-Nazis, and at that point, Phillips reportedly asked him, why are you even in this group? And Rucker replied by saying he will leave the band. And that's pretty much what happened. This dude's page was like crawling with neo-Nazis, and I was like, what's the deal with this? And his reply was, of course, a dodge, but just asking me why I was even in the band. And that's what people will do. You're like, hey, it seems like you have a lot of white supremacists and neo-Nazis and so on and so forth around you. And people will just question your dedication to metal as if you need, like, being okay with white supremacy is a requirement to liking metal music. It's so stupid. In that process, I was trying to convince myself that I was overreacting, that it wasn't as serious as I was making it. Then through a lot of work and research and Googling and doing all that stuff, within about 15 minutes, I found out that the Wolves got labeled as a hate group. He said, that's when finally was like, I can't be silent about this anymore. I got to tell someone about this. And that's pretty much what happened. I didn't think it was, at the time, just like how I was able to stay in the band and do everything, I thought I was making more out of it than what it was. I was still very young. I was 25, 24, 25. And I thought that nobody else thinks this is a big deal. And people are going to call me a poser and so on and so forth if I make a big deal out of it. So I'm just going to leave it be. But then I saw that the group was listed as the hate group. And I was like, no, this is actually not okay. You know what I mean? So it remains to be seen if Bestial Evil will be able to continue with this current controversy, particularly with Phillips returning to the band after he said he cut all ties to the Wolves, even to the point that he removed any patches of his garments related to them. Wright, who according to Rucker would like him to return to the band as well, maintains that Phelps was ultimately brainwashed by the group, which he feels preys on naive young people as potential recruits, and that his time in the Wolves should not reflect who Wright believes he is. I think that group is a really bad group, and I think that group deserves to not exist, he said. And I should let yet again state that, first of all, Bestial Evil is not a band anymore. Um, I talked to Sean. I won't say regularly, but I talk to Sean a pretty decent amount now. We started speaking again. Um, the other guitar player, Nick Timoshak, was never involved in any of this weird white supremacist Nazi shit. Um, and Two things can be true at the same time. I think that the Wolves of Inland, and by extension, a lot of white supremacist groups, um, they prey on naive people and impressionable people. Um, just look at like the metal scene and how they're able to persist and do stuff like Metal Threat, because you already have a bunch of really let's just be honest with ourselves, nerdy people probably don't have a lot of social adjustment just based off of the scene and the music that they're into. And they want to be a part of a social group. They want to have friends. Not only that, they want to be told that they're cooler, they're better than other normies, right? And it might even go a step further with them being told that the normies or other certain minority groups are the reason why they're being persecuted, right? Even though the persecution, it might not even be real, right? I shouldn't say it's not always real, because there are things that people in a certain socioeconomic class go through, but those things are not the fault of other minorities just existing in the country, right? But you have these groups that will come in and try to convince them that that's the case. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that because I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't bring that up and really go through it with the videos I'm going to do on GBK and Arguslint and Satanic Warmaster, and the couple of videos that I've done on Metal Thread and white supremacy and neo-Nazism and stuff in the scene. Um, it just is what it is. It sucks that people get low-key bullied into accepting this stuff, but I think we're at a place now, um, since, obviously I've been blowing the horn and banging the drum on this for the last 10 years or so, but you have people that are coming out like Andrew Lee, and, we've always had dope bands like Bolt Thrower who have never been cool with this shit. Um, um, we're coming into a place now, especially as more and more diverse people are getting into metal. Shout out Stabbing and like other really, really dope bands, Cross Spitter. You know what I mean? The homies, some of my really, really good people I've known for a long time in Cross Spitter, right? Um, it's dope that we're coming into a space where we can have all of these different influences in the music to make really good, aggressive, and heavy music, and it not just be this white boys club is bullshit. And it sucks that for a long time people had to feel like they had to keep quiet, or they just had to tacitly accept that this is always going to be a part of the scene. But like I said, I'm glad we're coming into a space now where it doesn't have to be like that, because it doesn't. You can call out weird racist or transphobic or homophobic or, xenophobic or whatever weird shit, anti-Semitic shit. Like, you can call that out and you won't be alone, because there's people like me. There's any number of people. There's like RABM bands. There's just regular grind and death metal bands that are not about that shit. And It doesn't have to just be something you accept. And I guess that's all I really wanted to throw out there. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you all. I hope to see you again soon. You can see my chat over here. I go live. I'm actually live right now while I'm recording this, but I usually go live Monday and Wednesday nights, 6:30ish p.m. Eastern time, like New York time, and then Saturdays I try to go live at like 10:30, 11 a.m. New York time. I don't always make it there because sometimes I have late Friday nights, but it is what it is. Make sure you like and subscribe, please, because these weird white power nerds are thumbing down on my shit and leaving really ridiculous comments all the time. Um, and yeah, that's all I can really say for now, anyway. You definitely haven't heard the last of me, but I'll see you soon.